Today in the first reading we have contrasted by St. Paul in the first letter to the Corinthians here, the spirit of the world and the spirit of God. And he says very clearly, as Christians we have not received the spirit of the world. We have received the Spirit of God that describes spiritual realities and spiritual terms, that we can judge by God's Spirit, that we have the mind of Christ, that we have a new knowledge, a new way of seeing things, a new ability to judge and discern things, not by something that comes from us, but something from without. So, oftentimes in Christianity today, it's like we're trying to use God to fit into our life, and we shortchange this renewal, this transformation that he wants to bring about. We could say in a sense that this is the purpose of Jesus' mission, right? The reading yesterday, if we hadn't celebrated Labor Day, we'd have that great reading from the first part of Luke's Gospel. This is Luke chapter 4, a little bit earlier. He speaks, he gets up in the synagogue to begin his public ministry, and he speaks about his being the fulfillment of the prophet Isaiah, that he is the one that has received this anointing of the Holy Spirit, right, to proclaim liberty to captives, to give sight to the blind, right, to heal, to have the poor will have the good news preached to them. So he is the one anointed. He's fully God and has the Holy Spirit, of course. And we could say the goal of his mission is to give us that Holy Spirit. That's our salvation. That's our sanctification. So yesterday's reading, he gets up in the synagogue and says this, and he says, he challenges them, as your fathers, persecuted the prophets, those before us. This is a time of fulfillment now. Receive this message, right? I am the one that's been prophesied to come. And they want to throw him off a cliff, right? They reject him. He walks through the crowd. So he comes down and he comes Nazareth, built on the side of a hill. He comes down to Capernaum by the sea, and he does this incredible exorcism, right? And everybody is astonished, right? He says he's one that speaks with authority and acts. He says, for with authority and power he commands the unclean spirits, and they come out. And news of him spread everywhere in the surrounding region. He has a new authority, a new power, because he is anointed with the Holy Spirit. Pope Benedict described it as, he speaks as the lawgiver, not just one interpreting the law, as maybe experts of the law, scribes or Pharisees or whoever, could make a commentary. He is the lawgiver, right? He gives the authentic interpretation because of the Holy Spirit. Pope Francis has spoken often about the spirit of the world, that St. Paul speaks of today. He calls it a spiritual worldliness, and he cites Cardinal de Lubac and borrows this terminology from him. And I just drew some thoughts from Pope Francis about this, this contrast, the Spirit of Christ that we're to have. The spirit of worldliness leads us to vanity, to arrogance, to pride. And Pope Francis challenges us to strip away every kind of worldly spirit in the church, to strip away every action that is not for God or from God, to strip away the fear of opening the doors and going out to encounter all, especially the poorest of the poor, the needy, the remote, without waiting, right? To have a certain restlessness. A worldly spirit is selfishness and self-centeredness that just wants to protect what we have, to hold what we have, to have our own little enclave, so to speak. He's challenging us, that Spirit of Christ, right, that drove Jesus into the desert, and he suffered temptation, that drives him to do the Father's will for our salvation. That Spirit of Christ is to be in us, right? That the church is essentially missionary by nature. He says, certainly not to get lost. This is a long quote from him. He said, we are called, certainly not to get lost in the shipwreck of the world, but to bear with courage the light of Christ, the light of the gospel, even in the darkness, where one can't see, where one might stumble. She must strip away the seeming assurance structures give, which though certainly necessary and important, should never obscure the one true strength it carries within, God. He is our strength, to strip away what is not essential because our reference is Christ. The church is Christ. He frequently challenges clergy in the hierarchy of the church, not to hide behind structures, right? That can sometimes obscure or make the gospel more difficult to give to others, but to have, and he quotes from St. John the 23rd and saying that we must reduce all things to the greatest simplicity and calmness, right? To be effective and to give this gospel to others. But we can all get trapped up in our own vision, our own way of doing things, and our own safety zone, so to speak, and not really encounter and engage others. Pope Francis challenges us to have a certain restlessness to share the gospel. Pope Emeritus Benedict said the same thing, that a priest should have a restlessness that's never just satisfied with what we've done or what we have, but to always be seeking to give more, to share more, to be more generous. Ultimately, spiritual worldliness is being self-centered. It's acting just for one's personal well-being, acting for one's own fulfillment rather than for the glory of God, living by self-sufficiency. That phrase caught me, acting for one's own fulfillment. Sometimes we can constantly approach the faith just by what God can do for us, how he can meet our needs, how he can make my life better, or just for my own peace of soul, so to speak. And not, the focus is still on us. It's not on God and what he's calling us to do, our vocation, or how to be generous with others. It can be a very self-serving attitude to have. In the joy of the gospel, Pope Francis writes, the stifling worldliness can only be healed by breathing in the pure air of the Holy Spirit, who frees us from self-centeredness, cloaked in an outward religiosity bereft of God. Let us not allow ourselves to be robbed of the gospel. We let ourselves be robbed of it when we don't breathe in this Holy Spirit. I remember one time I had a great opportunity to give a retreat in Alaska, in Juneau, Alaska, during the summertime, and it was beautiful. And I remember, I'm not sure, there were some kind of pine trees, and I remember these breezes would come down through these trees, and it was like the freshest air you've ever inhaled, Sometimes it gets pretty muggy and a lot of allergies down here in the south. The air sometimes almost feels thick with pollen. And I remember how invigorated I felt just breathing in this filtered air through these fir trees or pine trees, whatever they were. You think about that, the Holy Spirit. Right, breathing in a new spirit, not the spirit of the world of consumerism, materialism, hedonism, but breathing in the very breath and life of God that invigorates us, that makes us healthy, strong, and vibrant, that empowers us to be on mission, right? And to have that confidence that that Spirit of God can, enable us to fulfill that mission, that we have something to give that is not of ourselves, right? But we have this pearl of great price to share with others that he has strengthened us to do. So this Holy Spirit that is the cure for spiritual worldliness, I thought of 4 gifts of the Holy Spirit. Understanding, which gives a deeper insight and penetration of divine truths held by faith. Or the gift of knowledge that gives us the ability to judge things rightly concerning the truths of faith. Or the gift of counsel, to render the individual docile and receptive to the counsel of God regarding one's actions in view of sanctification and salvation. So those are 3 gifts, I think, that directly counteract the spirit of worldliness. And the highest gift, the gift that we could say really informs all the others, is the gift of wisdom. And this is the grace, and Pope Francis describes this gift as being the grace of being able to see everything with the eyes of God. That's what St. Paul talks about here, that we have the mind of Christ, right? We have, Pope Francis goes on to say, his heart, his eyes, his ears, right? To see the world, to see situations, circumstances, problems, everything through God's eyes. And this comes from intimacy with God, communion with the Lord, that the Holy Spirit transfigures our hearts, that the whole church is called to deep contemplation of God, right, to union with Him. And when we have that kind of relationship, it transforms us, or he uses the term, it transfigures us, right, to see and hear and to act as He acts. So the person knows about God, how God acts, when something is of God and when it is not. To see with God's eyes, to feel with God's heart, to speak with His words. I'm always struck by when I meet people that haven't, don't have a fancy education in the faith, haven't studied theology. As Dr. Garrity would say, they have a peasant faith, right? But it's real, and it's a real experience, a real tasting, a savoring of God that transforms them, that gives them a knowledge, a way of seeing things that is not of this world. So it's available to all of us, right? We don't have to go to some great school or read some great books to get this. It happens through faith, through communion with God, and through a real charity that works, right, and that enlivens that faith. That's what we're called to have. And if we have that, we bring something to this world. We can be salt and light, a true leaven that elevates the world and purifies it. May we be faithful in praying and begging for this gift. It's everything, right? It empowers us for mission. We desperately need it today.